Hello, listeners. This is the Risky Planner Podcast. Thanks for tuning in. I went to the just as an aside, I went to the Canada Arab Business Council Gala last night.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, and then before
Were
that...
they expecting you?
Yes. Dokanish are members of the Canada Arab Business Council, which is a great organization sort of representing and helping to facilitate a lot of the sort of, MENA, Canada business relationships. And then earlier in the day, I went to the business forum. So we sat down with like the Jeddah Airports company, Jedco, met with some other companies, and I'm sitting in the Ritz-Carlton, and like in the morning, like 8:30ish, 8:45, just doing some work down in the lobby,
like you do.
There's all this breakfast bars, I'm like, this is interesting, and in walks Shotani, Yamamoto, the whole Dodgers team walks in.
What?
Yeah. And they just arrived. Their flight had just arrived yesterday morning in Toronto, because tonight is the World Series. I mean, this is the series final for Toronto. If we win, we win the World Series, and are placed in immortality.
So you got to see
I saw them.
The Dodgers, like A-listers, some of the best baseball players of all time. Yeah.
Shotani he is super tall, because you remember he's like 6'6", 6'5" or something. But he was almost unrecognized because he had a big hoodie on, like you could barely see his face. Yamamoto. Yeah. Anyways, and then all the guys come through. It was cool. The people were taking pictures, and the hotel was like, "Hey, stop doing that." It was pretty cool.
Man, on the one hand, like they're adequately compensated for their inconvenience, but on the other hand, like what a pain in the ass to like not be able to go anywhere without having
your picture taken.
Yeah, man, seriously, like I barely remember to take my own picture in places that I care about with people that I love. So having random strangers taking pictures of me all the time would be gratifying for about one day, I think.
Yeah, it would be annoying. I agree. It would be really annoying.
Well, what are we going to do when our podcast gets us so famous that we can't go outside without being mobbed by fans?
I mean, that's what's going to happen, right? Like people 100%. Are going to want my autograph, and I'm going to just, use my palm print.
People are going to want your autograph, huh? Interesting.
Yeah, they are. Yeah. I'm going to sign Noah Fex for my autograph.
Boo. No.
Yes.
Oh, God.
Yeah. So let's go back to AI.
Yeah, okay.
You were saying you've got this workflow. I was talking about business writing slop.
Yeah.
I said that.
Yeah.
I had like some prompts that I was using. You responded to some good content that I'd produced through Claude.
Because it didn't seem like it was written by AI, right? And like we're finally getting to that point where enough people, because it used to be that you couldn't go online without absolutely being inundated. And I guess that's still true. Like with AI created content, like it's absolutely everywhere.
Have you,
sorry, go ahead.
LinkedIn?
Yeah, LinkedIn, yes.
No, I was going to say LinkedIn. It's not even, as a marketer, I look at LinkedIn now as a B2B channel, and I just don't, I like, there's so much noise.
Yeah, there is.
It doesn't feel like a viable channel anymore. I think you have to get people, and this has always been true, especially in growth marketing, where you're constantly iterating on content, and get people off of the channel and then like engaged on like your website or landing page, whatever. But it now more than ever, it feels sloppy and fake.
It does. But the flip side of that coin is that we've had enough time on target now that I think some people are starting to figure it out. Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like how to use it to create natural sounding content that actually reflects what you would have done if you had written the whole thing from scratch without help. Right.
I think
that's my goal when I'm especially when I'm building things for clients. Like I use AI to build work product for our clients. I mean, of course I do, because I would be foolish not to. Like it's a massive value add if you are not just using it to replace your job, but rather to supplement and augment it. So my workflow that I've gotten into is when I always provide it with some context. Like I try to give it a document or a snippet of text or something as an upload into the chat. And the first thing I tell it to do is to identify what I just gave it, right? So I say, tell me what you think this is and why it might be important. And that works best in the context of like a project, in Claude speak, where there's like some context and like some learning that the AI can draw from to answer the question. But then it'll say, okay, well, I think this is this, and like here's a quick summary of the contents, and it's important to you because it relates to this project. If it gets that right, then I move on to the next step, right?
Yeah.
The next step is telling it what I'm trying to do, right? I am writing this kind of document. I am building this kind of thing. I need to better understand this situation. Ask me any clarifying questions you need to understand better my goals and the underlying, that kind of thing. I'll ask it. I always tell it, ask me clarifying questions, right? And yesterday I was writing a document and I was up quite late writing it. And I was, using Claude to help me write it. And so it's like 11:30 at night and I'm banging away at this document, working with Claude. And I get to one of these ask me clarifying questions steps. And I say, ask me clarifying questions about that. And it churns out 40 questions.
Wow.
And I was like, Claude, it is 11:30 at night. Like, I don't think I have the energy for 40. Yeah. But anyway, that step though, like, because it will learn not just like the context that you provided to answer the questions, but also your style. Like as you're typing in, you're giving it like an idea of what your voice is like. And if you've given it a snippet of text, like I wrote half of that document with absolutely no help from the AI. It was the part that I cared about the most that I wanted to make sure reflected 100% accurately what I wanted to say about it. I mean, that was true for the whole document, but this part especially because I'm a scheduler by trade, right? So this was like the scheduling standards part. So I wrote that part without any help from AI and gave that document to it. And it picked up. I didn't even have to tell it like to mirror the writing style, to mirror the parallel structure. I did have to correct it a few times because it did what AI always does and, delivered a 15 out of 10 solution where like there was, way more text than was required, you know? But that workflow really has been working for me. Identify what this is, ask me clarifying questions, let's go.
So to build on that or to add my piece is the projects that I'm creating have always like a clarifying question step or, right? Like when I'm inputting, because I tend to like one shot it and I prompt and then I take one shot and then here's the content the brief that I came up with. I'll share that and then I'll one shot prompt and then, it'll kind of churn. I'll get a bunch of like edge kind of use cases, ideas, and then, it asks me clarifying questions. So it's like key for every project now that I have from designer, like UX, landing page, graphic designer to like business writing and other projects that I have for other use cases. And now like with skills getting layered onto that, it's always clarifying, right? Like keep quizzing me.
Why do you think we both landed there? Like what, I mean, I know why I did, but we're using these things for such dramatically different purposes.
Well, like I think it's understanding the iterative nature of using AI, I think is, we're both curious about new technology. And I think we both are domain experts in, I mean, maybe not me, but you are.
Oh, no, you definitely are. Like, there are some things I could name that you're a domain expert
yeah, sure.
in.
I wouldn't necessarily call myself a domain, but we are, artisanal, craftsmen. Okay, look, we're domain experts. We're curious. And I think from that comes a desire to get the best out of something. And so when we're using a new tool like AI, that we're recognizing sort of an iterative process, and part of that iterative process is like, how do you get from point A to point B? And that's like asking clarifying questions. Yeah. So I think it's like a natural, logical progression. Like, 10, 15 years ago, if I'm sitting with my agency team and we're like brainstorming, a concept for a campaign strategy, and then like the creative content.
This is how the workflow would go. You guys would be talking.
Yeah,
like
we
this
would
with each
kind
other.
of talk about that, and then people would be like, "Well, wait. So what about? And what about? So those are clarifying questions, right?
Yeah,
like,
yeah.
I think it's a natural. It's a natural progression. It's an evolution but it's based on sort of a logical sort of foundation that we use.
So you're gonna find this interesting, but do you want to hear my answer to that question?
Yeah.
So I came to it from a very technocratic perspective of I kind of sort of get how the large language models work and how they generate answers and what the feedback loop looks like. And one of the things that feedback loop has done, like the self-training elements of the models, which is like why they're so good, but it's also their main problem because they have been trained to prioritize wrong answers that sound right and make people happy as opposed to correct answers or admitting when they don't know something, right? This is my attempt to control for that inherent bias in the way that the model is set up and built, right? So in order to control for that negative feedback loop, I'm saying like, not only do I want you to admit when you don't know something, you need to explicitly take a step where you close gaps in your knowledge. And if you do it enough, eventually the model will learn like, oh, this guy wants me to ask questions when I don't get something. So like yesterday during that conversation, building that document, at multiple times when I didn't ask it to ask clarifying questions, it asked me clarifying questions. So I'm basically retraining.
Now, do you prompt it to ask you clarifying questions? Is that part of sort of the general?
I do up top.
So I'm using more and more skills to do master prompts, and then I'm using projects to Anyways, do you build that into
I haven't
the prompt
done that
itself?
Yet. I've always put it into.
Okay.
I mean, into the prompts, yes. Like, but like I'm talking about the individual like chat window prompts. Like I build it into those. But it makes sense to put it into the instructions, right, at the project level as opposed to at the chat level. So I'm going to
project level. I have an agency like for strategy project. I have a copywriter project.
Right.
I have a creative director project. So it's more of the sort of like high level design. Then I have like a designer project. These don't really like substitute for like having these full-time employees, but they do a pretty halfway decent job at like filling the gap for not having them. Because I know what good looks like. But it's interesting, like so I think I'm right on the curiosity front because we want to know how to use something. But yeah, you and I definitely came at it from a different means of,
like mine was from a close gap in tool perspective. Yours was from a mirror good workflow perspective. And they wound up at basically the same place, which is interesting.
Well, we're going to talk about something that is, it's a big question. It's a big topic for capital projects now, and it's outsourcing. So we're going to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, you must have seen the news about Imperial and ExxonMobil.
Yes.
Right?
That's
like, here's the thing. If you hear ExxonMobil talk about it, they're not talking about outsourcing or offshoring or anything like that. They're talking about streamlining operations. They want 2 central hubs for their like office-based workers. One is in Texas and the other is in India. So that's it. That's 2. And listeners with extremely sharp minds and keen memories may recall that I moved to Canada to build their headquarters office in Calgary, which is now empty as part of this change, or emptying, I should say.
And it's a beautiful building.
It's a lovely it was a great project.
Yeah.
I mean, not to pat myself on the back, but let me just pat myself on the back for a little bit. Like I was the master scheduler and planner for that project, and it came in on schedule and so dramatically under budget that we actually funded a whole other project from the overage, which did raise a lot of eyebrows about why it was estimated at that extremely high level in the first place. I personally was one of the people raising those eyebrows, but hey, cost was out of my hands, pal. I was the schedule guy.
Have fun.
But yeah, I mean, I can't resist someone else's job, right? So I did get my grubby little paws into cost from time to time. But that's not the point. The point is that is a Class A office building that's only around 10 years old, and it is fully unutilized at this point, almost fully. It had one of the most beautiful conference centers I've ever seen in a private office. It had a full-fledged food court, with really solid food offerings and, an executive office suite, a bunch of meeting rooms. It was one of those places that had the ping pong room, right? And that was cool, man. Like it was a genuine community feel. Like I worked in that office for a few years after we built it, and it was a great place to work. And now it's, all those people are either moving to Edmonton to consolidate into the Strathcona field office at the refinery up there, or ?
You're right. And I think the question mark is what we're going to talk about.
That's what we're going to talk about. Yeah, for sure. And I've had lots of conversations with lots of people who were former colleagues of mine at Imperial and ExxonMobil. I won't name any names, but I've got some juicy detail about this stuff.
Ooh,
I know, right?
Drama.
I'm not going to spill too much tea, but I will say that ExxonMobil's talking about consolidating, cutting cost, eliminating redundancies in their workforce. They're doing all of those things, but really and truly, what they're doing is they're offshoring. That's what they're doing. So
offshoring, just quickly. Let's define offshoring, in
Sure.
their capital projects, like project controls, context.
Oh man, don't even get me started on offshoring project controls. I mean,
I want to talk about the trade-offs next, but
yeah. We definitely will, because there are some.
Yeah.
But okay, so let's first off outsourcing, right? Like everybody outsources, every company outsources. What they outsource depends on the kind of work that they do. But like a classic example would be marketing or advertising, right? Mm-hmm. Like if you are a big brand, you probably don't do all of your own marketing and advertising. You outsource that, right? Now, the fact that it's outsourced just means that it's not your company doing it. So, Ducanish & Company, we're a consultancy. We're effectively an outsourcing tool for our clients. Like they can bring us in to provide business process expertise and project controls expertise, system implementations, all that good stuff. They could theoretically do all those things themselves, and frequently they try and fail and then talk to us. So that's the reason why offshoring happens, right? It's like to plug holes in your own, organization.
Outsourcing happens.
Outsourcing, yeah, exactly. But offshoring.
Offshoring, okay. Yes.
Offshoring is what has happened to customer service data centers, for example, over the course of the past, say, 30 years.
Yep.
Right? Not data centers, call centers. So when you call a customer service line and you are talking to somebody, there is a 90+% chance that person is not in North America. And say what you will about the quality of those conversations, that's not the point from the perspective of the companies that are doing this offshoring. The point is cost, right?
Yeah.
It's cost savings. So to me, that's an important distinction between offshoring and outsourcing, where if you're outsourcing, it's often because you can gain expertise, right? It's additive. Mm-hmm. If you're offshoring, it's because you want to cut cost, right? It's subtractive. So sometimes that comes with a quality hit, and sometimes it doesn't. Like one of those people I was talking to actually just yesterday is an engineer at Imperial. And he has had people from their engineering support center in Mumbai calling him semi-regularly to be like, how can we make your job easier? Like, what parts of your job would be good for you to outsource to us? Like, what can we do? And he said, these are really capable, solid engineers. But he also said, like, why would I train somebody to take my job from me? Like, I'm here doing my work. And they want to be like, what can I do that is your job? And it's like, none of it. Thank you.
Yeah.
Now, it isn't just a selfish instinct either.
Let me interject.
Yeah.
So did he say none of it because he's opposed to the help?
No, that's just what I was about to get into.
Yeah, it seems no.
No.
Why?
So a big part of it is the same reason why I'm opposed to offshoring project controls and project management, which is that this guy, a big chunk of his engineering role is field engineering and verification, right? He has to physically go places and look at stuff.
Yep.
And verify that it matches the design intent and that it is safe to occupy/utilize, that he has to write inspection reports and that kind of thing. And if you try to offshore those, I mean, the point he made was, what am I going to do? Tell you to come fly halfway across the world to inspect something that I'm a 2-hour drive away from? Like, why would you do that? It isn't. He doesn't. It's not that he doesn't respect these guys.
There's a big difference between being on a video call versus being there in person.
Absolutely,
especially from a project controls perspective.
100%, 100%. I mean, this kind of to me ties to the growth of AI agents now, where they're getting good enough that you could theoretically stand up a copy of yourself to go attend meetings for you. And I was talking with this about, I mentioned I'm neck deep in a project right now. My project team, I was talking to them about this. Like, if one person does that, it's no big deal, right? Like, they get a transcript of the meeting, they get some filtered notes, like, it makes sense. What if everybody does that? And then it's just a bunch of large language models talking to each other, and everybody gets a summary of the meaningless conversation that they had, right? Like, that's not better, right?
Yeah,
and
it's
so
just noise.
It's like it's closing the loop in a way,
right,
that isn't productive, right? It looks productive on paper because now you have people doing two things at once, but one of those things is utterly valueless and takes organizational resources to complete. So the reason why I brought that up as a comparison point is that, it's like closing the loop with technology isn't always a good thing.
Yes.
Because in a closed loop system like that, no new information is even possible. So when you close the loop technologically on something like field inspections, right, or progress updates, or on-site work coordination, like trade coordination, making sure that you have the right resources and that sort of thing, you can do some of that remotely. But at some point, somebody's got to actually go look at the work and say, this is what is needed.
What is... So I'm just imagining, like, what's the first thing someone notices when they step foot on a construction site for the first time?
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. Like, we're talking about closing the loop. Now I'm talking about starting the loop, I guess. What's the first thing they notice?
Well, it's a good way to get at the, what are the risks of closing it?
Yeah.
Because for me, the answer was scale.
Scale.
Meaning the size of everything. Like, when I first got onto a construction site, it was a commercial construction site, so it wasn't an especially complicated site. It wasn't particularly dangerous, but it was very crowded. So the number of people involved to hang drywall, put plumbing behind walls, make sure and to do it quickly, right? Because commercial properties generate revenue when they're complete, and they drain revenue, right? They require, they are a cost while they're being built, and they are a profit center when they're operational. So the faster you can get them built, it's like anything, that's revenue generating. You want to bring the project execution window right down. So that often means having a very, very crowded workface, like full of people and materials. And like, when I say about scale, things like the ring main ductwork.
Okay.
That services an office building with cold air, right, is enormous. And it's sitting above the ceiling and you'll never see it, but it's huge. It needs to be lifted into place and supported while it's being, like tacked in. And if you take that scale thing and take it out of commercial space and put it into almost any other industry where I've worked, like, one of the first major projects that I worked on was in a refinery in Southeast Texas. And that refinery at the time I was working there was over 100 years old. And there were operating pieces of equipment there that were over 70 years old, right? So you drive around, you see these things, like the towers are 30 stories tall, and there are whole road networks inside of these things to get from place to place. And like, you talk about, pipe, like if you see that pipe on a drawing, right? And where it goes from, like which piece of equipment's on this end, which piece is on this end, where are the relief valves, like you got an ISO, you can kind of see what the scale is. You can see like, oh, it's this long in this segment, there's this many fittings on it. You can read a drawing and get all that information. You take that drawing to the field and match it up to the actual pipe itself. That thing is huge, right? Yeah. It's a big thing, and it goes a really long distance. So if you're planning a project that is to cut that pipe in half and throw it away, right? You might say, oh, cut a pipe in half. You get a saw out. You do some energy isolation. You drain the pipe. You get the saw out there. You cut it in half. You take both halves out. Done. You're done in 2 hours. Right. Well, it's a kilometer long. Right. It weighs something. There's a road going under it. Like there are people working on the pipelines near it. There is dangerous chemical material flowing through some of the pipes. There is a massive spark risk from the work that you're doing. And I was talking about scale. This really brings me to the second thing that you notice.
Yeah.
Which is the complexity of it.
Yeah.
Right. Especially in brownfield environments, no job site contains only your project. It contains so many other things.
And the complexity is all of the variables around the people moving, there's math that represents the thing that you need to do, but it's all in isolation. It doesn't take into account variables in your environment.
Yeah, and it's to some degree this is important to me because I'm a visual and experiential learner, right? I mean, I internalize information most rapidly through my eyes. It's a weird way to say that.
I was like, where are you going with that? Because,
that's a really good question, Nate. Where am I going with that? But the point is that I needed to see it, really, to have it all make sense on paper. But even so, even if you're, a very abstract thinker, which, good for you, but I would still bet that an isometric drawing of a pipe that enters and exits a pipe rack is going to be fairly abstract even to you until you've seen where it actually is in your facility.
Yeah.
Right?
So what is there digital evidence you're referring to that is enough to replace people on the ground?
I mean, yes. I think this really depends on what you're building, what you're doing.
Take your colleague, for example, the engineer. He's hesitant to, offload stuff to his team.
So, if the reason for offshoring is to cut costs, there is irreducible complexity to the on-site version of this work. That means that there's a minimum threshold for how much cost you can actually cut, or a maximum threshold, I guess.
Yeah, it's not really, it's the expertise. If you're going to offshore for expertise and then you're willing to pay, that's not really cutting costs. I guess that's a completely different subject.
At that point, you're kind of totally,
might work.
And this, again, going back to this particular engineer, and I heard the same thing from another engineer friend of mine who said, these people are good. They're really good engineers. The schools there are good. They're experienced. They're smart. They know what they're doing. They turn around quality outputs. But they're over there, right? And if the projects are over here, then it does create that kind of separation. And there's this digital translation layer between, physical reality and digital reality, where that gap just absolutely has to close. Now, it's really, really difficult to do that and still save cost, right?
Right.
Because we had a whole other episode about digital twins. And that kind of class of project information is one of the ways to close this gap. Full blown reality capture, and paired with virtual reality, for example, would be a really good way to get an 80% version of what it's like on site. A lot of the things I was talking about, the scale of it, the complexity. That pipe's in a rack next to a bunch of other stuff. You can get that from a virtual reality model. You really can. But what is it going to cost you to build the model?
Yeah, and why do you think so let me set this up. So India, we were doing some research before this and prepping for this episode, and one of the research, the stats that you found was that India now hosts, nearly 2,000 sort of global centers that serve, different purposes.
Yeah, global capability centers, or GCCs.
Centers. Yeah, GCCs. And they generated nearly $65 billion in export revenue. Yeah. So, there's engineering, but people now are offshoring project management and controls. Why do you think that evolution happened?
There's the classic and slightly wrong, but still useful old saw in project management. The golden triangle of cost, schedule, and quality. Pick two, right? I was taught, as baby scheduler, that that whole pick two thing. It's funny, but it's also kind of true. And most of our clients, would choose which two they wanted based on the project, right? And like the end product that they were trying to build. So in some cases, they would pick schedule and quality. They want a good thing really fast, and they'll pay out the nose to get it. That, by the way, is pretty common still in like shutdown and turnaround work and like outage work. Like we're working with a client who runs a nuclear power station, and they do a lot of outage work, and they really, 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 really care about quality, right? Because they need to stand up a nuclear reactor at the end of it. So schedule and quality means, your outage is short, the reactor stands back up, everybody's happy. Like if they have to throw money at it, they will. Okay. But it seems like a lot of projects that would have chosen, say, cost and quality or schedule and quality as their two main focuses, or foci, I guess, are now choosing cost and schedule, right? Like you can have it fast and cheap, but not good, or good and cheap, but not fast, all that stuff.
Yeah.
They're saying like, okay, you know what? We're fine with fast and cheap, but not good.
Yeah.
That seems to be the shift that's happening. And no one would ever acknowledge that, right? Like if we dragged every CEO into a room and forced them to explain to you why they offshored something and asked them, is it because you wanted it to be crappy and cheap, they would say no, right? Like they wouldn't agree to that.
Well, they would point to their increase in revenue. They would point to their management of bottom line, operating costs. They would point to like various metrics that show that the company is productive and is doing well.
But like the modern Exxon Mobil has its roots in companies that are as old as that refinery that I was working at in Southeast Texas. These are corporations that are, the child organizations of something that you could consider to be ancient at this point, like 100+ years old. And they didn't get there by prioritizing today's bottom line. Meanwhile, there's a principle in economics that you have to incentivize the behavior that you desire. Right. So we are incentivizing CEOs and upper management to prioritize next year's return on investment, not 15 years down the line return on investment. Right. CEOs are more mobile between companies now than they have ever been before, and they are making more money compared to their average employee than ever before.
Right.
So their incentive structure is upside down and backwards, right? They're incentivized to cut cost and make the numbers be better this year so that they can, pad their resume with a big fat win and move on to the next company next year. And that means that long-term growth isn't really in the picture. And that's what I fear about this trend towards offshoring, is that we're going to wind up with so many quality issues.
Right.
That that long-term growth prospect just isn't there. Like they're going to stand up facilities that need enormously expensive maintenance to upkeep. It's, I don't know, maybe that's just me doomsaying, but it really does feel like a short-term vision as opposed to a long-term one.
Yeah, and we've talked a lot about sort of the negative side of offshoring, and then just to pivot the other side of the coin, like PMI did some research in 2024, and they found that project teams perform equally well across on-site, hybrid, and remote arrangements, kind of throwing offshoring into the mix.
Yeah.
They found that Agile teams might perform slightly better when fully remote, which is really interesting.
It is.
So from what you've seen, what helps make remote project management successful?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you're quoting PMI's 2024 Pulse of the Profession report, and if you know anything about the PMI and you've been kind of tracking its its progress over the past, I'm going to say, I don't know what number to say, 15 years, 20 years, maybe 15 for sure.
Yep.
You've seen it drift away from field construction management and like building big things, and towards IT project management.
Yes.
And a lot of people will claim that this is some kind of, it's the death of the profession. We're all IT project managers now. Grumble, 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 grumble. Well, frankly, yeah, we are all IT project managers now, right?
Like, what does that mean?
I used to manage.
What does that mean?
It means that it's a little bit like, agriculture, right? Like back in the day, the average American was a farmer who lived far from a city, and now the average American is a knowledge worker who lives in a city.
Yes,
right?
yes.
And in fact, that average is skewing ever more towards the city dwellers. And ever farther from people who like work the land for a living. Like there are precious few such people actually, right?
Right.
And
right.
even those folks, like a big chunk of the job of the average farmer is upkeep and maintenance of technology systems. Okay.
Yeah.
So as things get more technologically complex and rely ever more on digital solutions to problems, we all have to contend with our tech stack, right? The reason why I have this job is because of working in refineries and on construction sites and flying to Africa and building office buildings. And, that's why I have this job, right?
Mm-hmm.
But the job I'm doing today is a digital process evolution, right? That's what it is. So,
Yep.
I personally took off one hat and put on another one. I'd love to put the other one back on, but that's what happened.
Yep.
And also, even if I didn't do that, there are far, far fewer people building the average project now, physical construction project, than ever before because of increases in productivity, better tooling. Like, I was talking earlier about slamming that construction window as closed as it can get. There's good evidence that a shorter construction window means a better product, right? Because you've closed the door on a lot of risks that could impact the final quality.
Yeah.
So the shorter those projects get, the more productive the crews that are building them, the less need there is for a massive, talent pool of construction project managers. Right.
Okay.
So most just like, the average project manager maybe used to be building a refinery in Southeast Texas, the average project manager to now is building software for the web.
That's right.
So of course the PMI shifted in that direction because their average reader shifted in that direction. So that does mean, though, that those Agile stats, like Agile is a very, it's kind of a buzzwordy thing, but it basically just means iterative planning that doesn't necessarily mate itself to a fixed scope, right? That's the short version. So if you are on an Agile team, there's about an 80 to 90% chance that you're doing an IT project. So a lot of the data that you just cited, like it's true, but it to me speaks to the main way that you're going to get value out of this, which is matching the tool to its use case, right? Select the right tool for the job. So if you are managing an IT project with an Agile team, do it remotely. Sure, absolutely. Like, why not? Like there's good data to support that this is positive for you. And, I have a very close friend who is a IT, he's not a project manager. He actually manages a team of coders, right? And he is himself, a coder, and he's a really, really good one. Because he was the swinging hammers hard hat on version of that for a lot of years, right? Before there was ChatGPT to do half of his job for him.
Oh yeah,
he had to actually do it the hard way, and the deadlines were still tight, and the resources were still constrained, and so he just had to figure it out, right? Well, that experience mated with new technology means he can do the job of, I'm going to guess, 5 or 6 people, right? And even on his team, which he leads and manages, and like he gives them work to do, and he's checking. He is the most productive member of his team by a factor of 3 or 4 at least.
And he's the manager.
And he's their manager.
Right. Wow.
But that is a fully remote team. Like, I go visit his house whenever I'm in Houston, and he has this lovely little office off to one side.
It's so the mission control.
It's mission control, right? And he is in there 10 hours a day, 12 hours a day. Just banging out code and managing his team remotely. And he's really, really good at it, and it's really productive to do it that way.
So going back to the engineer, and maybe to close this out, like what's like one piece of advice that you would give somebody in project controls, project management for capital projects that's faced with a sort of option of, do I offload this to my now offshore team, or do I keep it in house? What's the advice and like on how to sort of think about that?
So
question.
I love that question because to me this is one of this is a real workers of the world unite moment for me. And I will echo some advice that I got from Dr. David Hewlett at the AACE conference earlier this year. I asked him that very same question, like what piece of advice would you give to people? One of the things he said was push back against bad practice, like bad ideas by executive management. Like stand up for doing a good job, right? Quality matters. And that's what I'm going to tell, your average junior project controls person or project manager who's looking at maybe being offshored. You need to stand up for the idea that perhaps it doesn't make sense to do that, right? Like even this client, like the one that I'm neck deep in a project for, they mostly have their project team on site, meaning at their offices, which is right next to the power station, right? Mm-hmm. But even then, most of those people don't go to the job site, right? Like I met a project manager last week who was killer, like absolutely awesome. Like I could tell from talking to him that he really knew his stuff. He was super effective. He was using his schedule better than most of his peers. He was getting his projects done on time and on budget, like a really, really effective project manager, right? After the meeting, the next thing I saw him doing was putting on some wireless headphones and going to get a coffee, and like, I'm not saying that's the wrong thing to do. Okay. But like my old man version of that was I would have the meeting like the one I just had with myself. And then I wouldn't put on headphones and go get a coffee. I would put on a hard hat and go out to the job site. Right.
Right.
But the first instinct of your average project manager at that job site isn't to lace up their boots and go see what's going on at the workface. It isn't that, right? Maybe make it be that. Like increase your own productivity by creating an irreplaceable set of skills driven by real workface experience. Like I mentioned earlier, the reason why I have this job is because I had all those other ones. Like that could be true for you too, right? So lace up your boots, put on a hard hat, and go look at the work, right? And then you can tell your bosses, well, here's what I can offshore and here's what I can't, right?
Yeah.
Because it's not like you can't do it, right? Like even in construction, like we talked about the digital layer, right? Like, is it just a fig leaf? I don't think so. I think there's some real there, okay? But it has to be paired with good practices, right? Like any technology solution has to be paired with like procedural and behavioral solutions too. And there are good ones that like you could do buddy systems where you have, an on-site person who is paired up with somebody who's offshored so that they have like a real working relationship that they can leverage to like do knowledge transfer and like have some of that field stuff like reflected in documentation. Like you can have your schedule fully off-site. I wouldn't do it, but you could do that as long as they had regular, consistent, high-quality access to information from the site.
Right.
Like making it clear who does what on a job site. Like setting up that every project has a RACI. They're mostly a tick box. You do it at your gate and then you forget about it. But what if you actually used it as a tool for managing work on a daily or weekly basis? I mean, most companies that offshore already do this. They set up what are often called golden hours, where like the working schedules overlap. And like if you're doing work in Canada and your project manager is in India, naturally you guys would never talk, right? Like because it's day over there and night over here, and so you just need to make sure that working hours are aligned such that you can get real face time with people. And even though it's expensive, I do think it's still valuable. Maybe not every single time or every single week or every single month, but get some of those folks that are offshored on site.
Yeah.
At least sometimes, at least get them there once, like give them the grand tour, let them take in that scale that I was talking about earlier.
Yeah.
And like really feel it, especially the ones that haven't been on construction sites before, because we're in real danger of raising a generation of project managers and project controls professionals that have never seen a construction site.
That's quite existential.
It is, man. It really is. Like it makes me feel like I'm from a different planet. Sometimes. So
you are from Texas. No hate for Texas.
Yeah, it's true. I am basically from a different planet.
Yeah,
that's true.
That's great. Well, yeah, this was a really interesting conversation. Thanks, Albert.
Yeah, thank you, Nate. And I hope you guys enjoyed the random off-topic meandering conversation.
I certainly hope so.
This one. I really
if you like
did,
listening to me drone on, then you probably enjoyed it. But there's very few people that like that. So,
well, I'm one of them, Nate. So thank you, my friend.
Yeah, it was fun.
Talk again. We'll talk very soon. I'll see you in Toronto next week.
You bet. All right. Thanks for listening, everybody.
Hey everybody, it's Albert here. Thanks for tuning in to the Risky Planner podcast. We hope today's conversation was informative and above all else inspires you to excellence in what you do. If you like today's episode, don't forget to rate, subscribe, and leave a review. It helps us reach more listeners just like you. I'd also like to thank Thompson Igbo for letting us use his excellent music on our show. If you like what you hear, check him out at igbomusic.com. That's EGBO music.com. Talk at you later.